in extending a very warm welcome to Chairman Royce and his team of eminent congressmen from the US, and they are Congressman Luke Messer, Pete Sessions,
Go ahead and stand up, Luke, from Indiana, Chairman of our Policy Committee.
Matt Salmon,
With Pete Sessions, I mentioned you
Amy
guys.
Barra, George Holding, and ranking member Ms. Nita Roy. She just tells me that this is her third trip to India. I also welcome members of our own strategic fraternity and also that from the corporate. Chairman Royce, it is our privilege that you and your delegation have chosen to visit the VIF and have an interaction with us. We hope that we can build upon this meeting to engage in specific policy dialogue in the future as well. Herein I will particularly like to thank our visiting fellow Mr. Devan Verma. Where is he? Yeah, please. For having facilitated this visit and interaction. Actually the process started around 4 months back when I was in the US on a holiday. Congressman, your visit comes at a most appropriate time in the Indo-US relations. It is heartening that our relations are now moving at a brisk pace, and we do hope that the road ahead should be of great promise and warmth. In two vibrant democracies like ours, the cord of friendship is reinforced at many levels. At people-to-people contact, business-to-business dealings, exchanges between think tanks, and most of all, through the real practitioners of statecraft, the legislators, to drive relations to a higher trajectory. And here we are very fortunate that India has a friend in Chairman Royce. We deeply acknowledge your support for India and your tremendous contribution in the furthering of the Indo-US relations, and help build the India caucus into a formidable force. Ladies and gentlemen, Chairman Royce is serving his 12th term in the Congress and represents California's 39th district. For the current Congress, he was selected to be the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and as a matter of fact, he's been in the Foreign Affairs Committee ever since he first became the congressman in 1993. He has also guided legislation on the House floor in July 2006 to pass the historic US-India Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement, beating back several what they interestingly call poison pill amendments. Now with Prime Minister Modi at the helm of affairs in India with a massive mandate, and just now while talking to Ms. Royce, she said that it is really promising. So I hope that promise will be kept. And the great camaraderie that exists between the two leaders, between President Obama and Prime Minister Modi. This is a unique opportunity to strengthen Indo-US ties, especially in the economic and security spheres. Now both of these are the areas which are of interest to the two nations, and that's where our interests also converge. Now coming to the two specific subjects of the day, which are under discussion, one is Asia Pacific region. Now Asia Pacific region is the most rapidly growing and dynamic region in the world. It is home to more than 50% of the global economy, 34% of the total US trade, and 61% of the world population. I am not counting the nuclear powers in this. The US is now India's biggest trading partner, and it is hoped that over the next 5 years our trade will multiply 3 times. The rise of China and its military power has been the most alarming development of the world in the last 3 decades. Now presently China is assertively enhancing its strategic influence in the area and beyond. Now this is a matter of great concern to us all, and we need to evolve strategic partnerships in this region. Now this is not with a view, and I emphasize that, to contain China, but it is to manage China in a manner that its rise is in a positive manner. We could instead like China to be a part of the mainstream towards ensuring greater economic growth of the region. The joint statement between our two leaders should go a long way to ensure the security and prosperity of the region. Coming on to the second topic of the day, and that's the defense preparedness and our self-reliance. Now, in defense in India, we have a requirement of approximately 120 to 150 US billion dollars worth of equipment over the next to 10-15 years. Presently, US is our biggest supplier of arms, but unfortunately, the status remains that of a buyer and a seller. India has now decided to go on self-reliance and is looking forward to the US to help India design and manufacture this equipment, so that it is a win-win situation for both our countries. Maybe we will develop together first, co-manufacture, then go on to co-designing, and also alongside the transfer of technology. The process could take place something like that. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now invite Chairman Royce to share his thoughts with us. Chairman Royce.
Well, General Leach, thank you very much, and we must thank the VIF for this opportunity, for this dialogue here today. The members of Congress who were with me on this delegation have very much looked forward to a dialogue about how India and the United States can cooperate more closely. But I wanted to begin by mentioning that Ida Lowy is the ranking member, key decision maker, along with Kay Granger on our Appropriations Committee. And this committee determines how the money is spent. This is our third trip to India together. We first came with President Bill Clinton, and then on a trip that you organized and brought me along, and now I'm trying to return the favor to you, Ida. But one of the things we discussed was trying to bring high-ranking, high-profile committee chairman from the United States Congress here to be part of this dialogue. And so we have the chairman of our policy committee with us, who has been introduced. But I'd like Luke Messer to just stand for a minute, because I want to thank him for his work in establishing the policy relationships. Certainly, our rules committee, our powerful rules committee, chaired by Pete Sessions. He's from Dallas, Texas. Let's have him stand for a minute again. And, Matt Salmon chairs our committee that focuses on Asia, the Asia Subcommittee in the Foreign Affairs Committee. And a committee that I chaired for 4 separate times. The India Caucus is co-chaired today by our friends Dr. Ami Bera from California, and George Holden from North Carolina. So as we join with you here to discuss this theme that the General has laid out, and I remember well my discussions with our former Secretary of State, Powell, on this subject, and some of his pronouncements on it. As you know, back in the early 90s, some of us decided, as you did here, those of you who were forerunners of the VIF, and I just wanted to thank Ajit Doval, the National Security Advisor to the President, for receiving us and having a discussion yesterday. He was once in your position here with this organization. This thought that Powell best, I think, summed up with the words, India has the capacity to keep the peace in the vast Indian Ocean and beyond. As we have tried to recognize that building our relationships based on common values, based upon the thought that India is committed to political pluralism and to tolerance and to the rule of law, some of us have long argued that this is where our focus and attention should be. And if we think about the geopolitical shift that has occurred certainly since 1993. I remember when I joined Congress, there were 8 members in the India caucus. So we have built that up to 160. But think about what has happened along the way. Now, in 1998, I had a little dispute on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I was at a hearing pointing out that China had transferred ring magnets to Pakistan, and that China should be sanctioned for that activity. But instead, at that point in time, if you'll recall, it was India that took the brunt of the sanctions that were imposed by the administration. I introduced legislation to lift those sanctions, and thus began a long dialogue with our friends in India of trying to create a rapprochement. And I must share with you, Chief Minister Moody left an indelible impression upon me. I flew into India the day after the earthquake in Gujarat, and I saw in Bhuj the total devastation. Did I ever think that Bhuj would ever be rebuilt? Could I have contemplated not just the resiliency of the Gujarati people, but the leadership in Gujarat? But we saw with our eyes the chief minister on the ground, hands-on handling that crisis and beginning that process of rebuilding Bhuj and rebuilding Gujarat. And thus it was that an example was set as we saw the economic engine of India's growth be centered in the economic growth coming out of Gujarat. But part of it was the reforms that were put in place there. Now, since we can speak freely between us about some of the concerns of investors in the Indo-American community, I can share with you some of the issues raised with me. 80 permits to open a hotel. But in Gujarat, they began to discuss how to change that. The Indian American community shares with us that it's 80 permits in India, it's 6 permits in going into Singapore, and so the investment goes to Singapore. Because of the reforms made in Gujarat and because of the reforms that are being attempted today, we have seen a 4-fold increase in investment over a period of 12 years in India. But the vision now is to take this across India. The vision now is to see that $100 billion of trade grow to $500 billion. But for that to happen, what's necessary are the economic reforms being pushed through right now. Now, we've had an opportunity, our delegation, to meet with the Prime Minister and the other ministers in this government. We're here 3.5 days, so we've had an opportunity to have a long dialogue with a lot of officials to really look at the budget. I think the reduction in the corporate tax rate to 25% is a big step in the direction of bringing more capital investment. I think the focus on infrastructure is a necessary focus. I'll go off topic here for a minute and just say, I also think, as the co-chairman of our Conservation Caucus and the co-founder of our Conservation Caucus, how excited we are in the United States to hear the Prime Minister lay out a strategy in terms of clean India, in terms of what to do on water and on health. And this is an issue we've worked on in the United States and worldwide because there is an environmental component to this as well. I think the responsible governance articulated by the Prime Minister with that concept of minimal government, but maximum governance, this issue of good governance that he brought to Gujarat State, to see this laid out as a formula, lays the groundwork for the economic growth for India. Now, how can India be strong in terms of its position? How can it have a critical deterrence militarily? Part of that is by having the strongest possible economy. And to have that strongest possible economy, that is where I think, this dialogue on liberalizing, on moving away from the old licensing Raj, maybe you'd call it, this old system where those permits are so tough to overcome, to a system of opening the economy. You know, Rao's reforms began to open the way, but now there's this possibility to speed up and accelerate this to such an extent that India can have that economic strength. And I think also we have an interest in the United States in serving as a platform to focus on these opportunities in India. You and I have seen the studies by FICCI, which show that the opportunities for return on investment for investors is much higher in South Asia than it is, for example, in Beijing. Why? Rule of law makes a big difference. Rule of law makes a big, big difference. And currently, it's very hard for investors to get their money out. And many times, when we're talking about investments in China, many times those rules are changed to the detriment of international investors. But India has the rule of law, which brings us to a subject of some of the reforms anticipated. Because though India has the rule of law, like in the United States, the courts are backlogged. 3 million cases. So what India is looking at doing is something that we ever more frequently do in the United States, which is some type of reform that allows cases to be adjudicated much more quickly. So that instead of a four-year time frame to go through the courts, they can be done more quickly. And instead of waiting 4 1/3 years to get money back from an investment gone sour, this is adjudicated much more effectively, efficiently, with lower cost and quickly. And so I think that some of the thoughts here in arbitration, maybe picking third-party arbitrators, for example, in London, that can do this arbitration quickly, will help bring additional dollars. I'm going over a lot of topics here with you, but that's because there are a lot of different issues that are being looked at as India begins to take these steps, position where the trade and investment issues really help drive up economic growth. The bilateral investment treaty that we're working on with India is another example of cooperation. I have also had an opportunity to see the military exchanges and see also, I was at the International Fleet Review in Mumbai, and that was for me a very educational experience to see the major navies of the world all there in tandem with the Indian Navy, and to inspect the new Indian Navy and see its projection, as Powell spoke to, and we were very appreciative of the work against piracy that India does. I think I would just make an observation that India also faces certain common challenges. And as I met with the Prime Minister, I did relay, as did our members here, our desire to increase the level of cooperation as it relates to counterterrorism. My suggestion was that we take the leadership in Homeland Security and the leadership in our intelligence agencies and bring them here in India, and let's have that higher level dialogue, because these problems that we face today are not going away. Because of the use of social media, because of the internet, you and I know that it's becoming easier and easier for this cooperation between militancy that seeks to carry out attacks on civilian populations to expand their operations. And I wanted to talk on another issue here in terms of cooperation between India and the United States. And that is finding a way to try to block the sums of money coming from the Gulf states into Central Asia and South Asia. I hear the same stories wherever I go, in Uzbekistan, in Kyrgyzstan, the money coming into the Deobindi schools that are, having this impact. There's 600 Deobindi schools in Pakistan that for many years I've been trying to get closed. We know where those schools are. Documentaries have been made. of what goes on in those schools. I know a young Pakistani American who went, a graduate from the SC Film School, that went in there and documented what is going on. Those schools need to be closed by the government in Pakistan. And the money that flows in from the Gulf states that continue to feed this, it has to be addressed. In Kyrgyzstan, I talked to a local government leader who told me that there were 12 boys who went to one of these Deobandi schools. He thought it was like an old school madrasa where they would get an education, but it was not. The education they were getting was in jihad. And so the 12 of them decided to leave the classes and to quit. The headmaster caught the 12 of them and decapitated them. And as the local governmental leader shared with me, this is not a Kyrgyz custom. They are changing our culture. This is a Gulf state custom. This is a jihadist custom that is being introduced here. You know, this type of tactic of beheading to enforce the will of the jihadists that are teaching here. We saw the influence of money coming in order to affect television and radio and newspapers. And so as we look out across Asia and as we contemplate the ways in which we need to cooperate together, doing something on terrorist finance together in order to track this money, track money coming into South Asia, and in order to put pressure together on those who would look the other way while terrorism is being financed by some in their society. This becomes a very important issue for civilization, for the peace. So these are some of the issues. I am surprised sometimes when we see the media talk about the idea that we've discovered India as sort of a natural ally for democracy to democracy. Some of my friends in this room know that this discovery goes back a long, long way, frankly, to India's constitution and to the attempts over the years by those of us that have been building bridges. But you are part of continuing that effort to understand that when we share values and we have a vision of how we can bring a more secure world, it's a natural thing to have those who are committed to those values, which your Constitution and our Constitution, it's the same ideal. And neither of us have reached that ideal. In the United States, we've got a ways to go. And in India, there's a ways to go. But here's the point, in terms of the concept of human freedom. What we share is that this is our principle, and we will continue to drive our society towards this respect for individual liberty, for respect for the rights of women, for the concept, the belief that a free society in which we continue to trade around the world and liberalize our institutions and open those societies. This is what will give those least able in our respective societies an opportunity. And what I am most excited about in India today is the fact that I think the reforms will unleash human capital, will give this next generation of young people out in rural India an opportunity to be part of the success that frequently on the world stage, all India enjoys. So we're mindful that as we make these strides and we increase this opportunity, we must have also that credible deterrence from those who are not looking at the principles that we share. For those that are pushing a different set of either utopian values or the attempt to conduct jihad and eliminate our opportunity for freedom of religion or freedom of speech, or for those states that don't respect international law or don't respect the Treaty of the Sea who don't respect the idea that the world can be opened with a win-win opportunity for all nations. And in that, we share these common goals with you in India and with the VIF, and we thank you very much for this dialogue that we've had, and one that's been ongoing for a long time, but one which we continue to build upon. And it's my commitment, our commitment as a delegation, to really take this to the next level. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, now I'll invite Representative Ms. Nita Loy to make her remarks. But just to introduce her, she is a ranking member on the House Appropriations Committee. She has served as a U.S. representative from New York since 1989, and this is her 13th term in the House. Madam, we are privileged to have you with us, and we salute your tremendous contribution to economic and social causes like job creations and economic growth, and also equal pay for equal work for women employees, sport for veterans, where you have recently shepherded a bill through the House of Representatives. So you're doing a lot of work for the women. As a matter of fact, the women corps in our country are also on the rise. And as a matter of fact, there's a lot of discussion on whether they should be brought into the armed forces now on full-time basis. But thanks to you, I think the women in the states are much better off. May I now request you to speak? You could, I think, speak from there only. It would be better off.
Well, I thank you very, very much for that very generous introduction. I was so enthusiastic about being back in India that I took a slip yesterday. So I appreciate your gracious willingness to let me sit right here. First of all, I do want to say it is a delight being here, and especially to be part of a delegation led by Chairman Ed Royce. Now, many of you don't know Chairman Ed Royce, but Chairman Ed Royce. Now, many of you don't know Chairman Ed Royce, but he is so well respected. He is probably one of the most thoughtful, intelligent, hardworking experts on India. So we both came, as you heard, with President Clinton, which is quite an opportunity. We just kept running just to keep up with him, and the crowds were 10 deep everywhere. But this is a special delegation because Chairman Royce introduced all my colleagues as well. So it's a group that has the power to make change and the commitment to make change, and that combination led by Chairman Royce is really very, very important. So I want to thank you, General Beach, for giving me the opportunity to share a few words, and I know we will have time later to have some personal interchange. I really appreciate being invited here today. I want to quote Secretary John Kerry from the Center for American Progress, because what he said was innovation and entrepreneurship are in both of our DNA. They're really part of who we are. And they not only make us natural partners, they give us natural advantages in a world that demands adaptability and resilience. The partnership between the United States and India is deep and steadfast. It's based on shared democratic values and traditions. And as you heard, as the ranking member of the House Appropriations Committee, I am so committed to working with Chairman Royce and all my colleagues to ensure that the partnership between the world's largest democracy and the United States remains strong and vibrant. I'm glad to be here because this foundation is so important. As a policymaker, I know the importance of having third-party analysis and research to help inform decision-making by elected officials. This is a central but often underappreciated part of a successful democracy. So I want to personally thank you for all the good work you do. In a joint opinion piece in September, the leaders of our two nations described the U.S.-India relationship as robust, reliable, enduring, and expanding. We in Congress do not take such allies for granted, and we are pleased to have partners like India to help tackle the economic, human, and security challenges that face both of us. Just as we support India's growing role in the international system, we also value our work bilaterally and the growing ties between our two countries. I'm particularly enthusiastic to call India a partner on Afghanistan. The success of Afghanistan is not just an important part of the foreign policy of the United States, but a viable, stable Afghanistan is a requirement for the success of South Asia. The $2 billion provided for the rebuilding of Afghanistan by India is more than just financial support, but an investment in the stability of the entire region. The recent conclusion of negotiations around the Defense Framework Agreement is another tangible byproduct of our growing relationship. This framework breaks new ground for our two defense establishments to continue to grow and share their capabilities. In just one example, the oceans are too fast to be secured by one nation. We deeply appreciate the assistance of the Indian military to secure open seaways and commerce, a cornerstone of a free, rule-based global economy. The investments made by the United States in the capacity of the Indian military are mutually beneficial. Our joint military exercises build the kind of transparency that will be needed as we jointly face the threats of the coming years. Terrorism is a threat to all of us. Unfortunately, that both the United States and India understand intimately how to deal with these threats while maintaining an open and pluralistic society is a daily challenge. There is much to learn from each other, and intelligence sharing is in both nations' interests. I can go on, but as usual, my chair gave such a thoughtful, intelligent speech, I'll just close briefly. The United States ties to India are multifaceted and extend beyond our two governments, but also to our businesses, universities, civil societies, and our people directly. I experience it every time I speak to my own Indian American constituents. There is broad recognition that an India that is strong at home will be able to play a stronger, more confident role outside its borders. Prime Minister Modi has spoken eloquently. In fact, Chairman Royce and many of our delegation were at Madison Square Garden as we welcomed the Prime Minister. The cheers, the enthusiasm by all in attendance was an experience that I will never forget. Prime Minister Modi spoke eloquently about his goals for inclusive development. The United States has already invested in bringing the lessons and technologies developed here to help other countries addressing similar challenges, and we will support the continuation of these efforts. So I just want to conclude by saying this is such an exciting time for our relationship. I want to thank you again for your hospitality and for your friendship. We look forward together together we will face the challenges.